Right, welcome back. We are now on page 313, which is item 2.3, the Mercury Bay Community Board Work Programme. Can I please have a mover?
I'll move.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Bill, thank you. Right, do we have any discussion? I had some notes somewhere.
First one, the coastal erosion one, something I spoke to Bruce about yesterday. So mainly after a conversation that I didn't think was coming my way from the mayor, was to find out where is. So my understanding was that the Mercury Bay Community Board, Thames-Coromandel Council, had prepared and submitted the necessary consents. That is for the wall, and there are two options on that, and the groins. That's gone to WRC to be consented. It doesn't drive me nuts as a dual consenting, but it's besides a little hip to another way. And now I understand that WRC want to have this publicly notified.
Where was that for, Tony? Sorry?
This is for the coastal erosion for the Cooks Beach, Flaxmill Bay. So that we have done.
So we've done the backstop.
As I understand it. Pardon? No. We've done a sand push up there.
We've done the backstop wall at Cooks Beach at Parangi, and then the sand push up's been done over the backstop wall.
Yeah, and the groins.
But the groins for Flaxmill are the ones being consented.
And they're going to be publicly notified, is what I'm told.
So I think that decision's yet to be made. So there was feedback, like a draft decision around notification came from the regional council talking about public notification. We've supplied more information back to them via my team and the consultants that we're using, Foresight Consulting, and we'll see what happens. But I anticipate that we don't believe it needs to go through the public notification process. We've done a lot of work. We lodged on the 27th of February of this year the consent for the groins. So yeah, these things do take some time, that's for sure.
But I'm trying to get to this. It's not, the mayor was implying that I didn't know or we didn't know what we're doing. And I'm saying, wait a minute, we've done everything that we're supposed to do, to the best of my knowledge. But I have no influence over the Waikato Regional Council and how they want to progress this. So the discussion really is her discussion with her counterpart in the Waikato Regional Council to say, because I believe there are party political motives behind how these things work. You can speak to every person that I know that lives in this environment, and to a person they think groins are at least worth trialling. But there are some people who don't want anything in the marine environment. And if the Waikato Regional Council is some of those people, that is pushing it. But frankly, and I don't know where to, but somehow we've got to make sure people don't know that it's not Thames-Coromandel District Council or the Mercury Bay Community Board holding this up. We've done everything that we could possibly do. We're at someone else's mercy now. So I only raise that for what it's worth because I keep getting asked questions about it. I'm sure other people do too. And
linking back into the ratepayer groups and letting their chairs know sort of an updated where we're at?
Yes, so through the chair, so my team that are working on that are keeping in touch with those organisations.
Well, speaking of ratepayers groups, at the meeting that I attended when the Whitianga or Mercury Bay Ratepayers Association was being set up, Russell Remington and Dennis Teague were there, and Russell was very, very unhelpful at that meeting and said that we had made an absolute cock-up of the costing for what was going on at Flaxmill. And I reminded him that we've had some setbacks in the past, and I go back 11 years when there was an attempt by Waikato Regional Council for public notification on Brophy's Beach, which held everything up. They are definitely against groins. We have tried, we were given $25,000 from WRC, and we said, oh good, we can do some trials with groins. And they said, no, you can't use that money for that. And I'm going back 10 or 11 years. And they said, well, I asked them, what can we use the money for? And they said, science. And I said, who will do the science? And they said, we will. No, this is going round and round. They are not supporting us. And I can't find out why we apparently are making applications which they can't or won't support. So I'm confused.
I personally think that there's more to it. Every coastal scientist and engineer that I've ever spoken to, almost to a person, not everyone, almost to a person, don't support groins. It's as if when you go to university to study this, people are saying at that level, these things are not desirable. Because it doesn't matter who you talk to. You go and talk to the freshest graduate and talk about a groin, and they sort of they don't say it's a good idea. No, I'm saying, oh, you better think about that. So I don't know how it comes about, but it's frustrating. But I think we just need to make sure that we have the communities involved, knowing that it has got nothing to do with us. Our elected arm and our staff have done everything they could possibly do to progress these things. They're supportive of it, but we can't override the regional council as much as we might like to. The bigger discussion for me is that I think between our chief executive and mayor, there's got to be time in Wellington trying to get some rationale about why do we dual consent? Because why did we do all the work to give it to someone else to redo again? We may as well have asked them to come and prepare a consent for us at a regional council level. And whichever way it goes, it goes. But it just seems ironic to me that we almost squander 50% of the time we put into this and money for someone else to have a different opinion.
And that's something that's come up around this table time and time again.
I agree.
Dual consenting just doesn't make any sense.
To the extent I would probably like to see a pretty strong note about that in the minute. And I'm happy my name's decided saying that the chief executive and mayor perhaps have got to engage with the appropriate people at a national or central government level or local government New Zealand level to rationalise the dual consenting, because not only does it add cost, it adds time and frustration. And then when those minutes turn up in council, I get the opportunity to speak to them and can remind them again that it would be a good idea.
That's good.
All right. Were there any other items in your?
Well, the other thing I want to raise is, so we spoke about the cost for the sheriff block and bringing a budget forward. And is there anything in here that any of us are prepared to push out? Because as other people said, it'll make it easier. So
just bearing in mind, should we maybe pick that conversation up in a workshop? Just in light of.
Well, I'm just saying for us, is it anything, because if we go through this and approve this, we're saying, here goes the works program.
So through the chair, so you don't need to approve the program, it's already in place. I think there could be some opportunities as we move through the financial year to look at prioritisation of work and possible changes to the program, and whether there's anything you want to look at removing as we go through the year. I think that
good counsel.
Yeah.
And can I just get an update or an understanding with the concerns that were raised this morning regarding the boating club and the erosion there?
Yes, so we can talk about that quickly. Yeah. So from the boating club, I don't know all the details, but I know that there was a condition on their consent originally around if there was erosion, they would expect the building up and move it. Now, obviously, that's not an ideal situation to have to do that, and that would mean us just our reserve disappearing. So we're not suggesting that. We've had our coastal scientist who's only been around for a month so far, so we've just deployed him. So he's getting to grips with a number of issues around the peninsula, and I think Councillor Fox raised it previously that we've got something like 13 or 14 sites around the district that over the last couple of months have really suffered some erosion issues that we're trying to work through. So it's not only Buffalo Beach, I know everyone knows that. He's been to site, he's had a look at it. What he's in the process of doing at the moment is getting and calculating some trigger levels so that we can actually put some trigger points in that site so that we know. Then once we've got those trigger points, we can make decisions on what we're going to do when we hit those trigger points, and we can actually then get that out there and say, look, this is the plan, this is what we're going to do. We're not just sitting here waiting for it to disappear something one night. We'll set some trigger points as things are moving back. If they get to this point, this is what we're going to do. If they get to that point, this is what we'll do. Now, we've talked about, in public forum, it came up about groins. And obviously just that links back to the discussion we just had around Flexible Bay and the time taken to get a resource consent for even trial groin. So we just need to factor that into our thinking. It's not as quick as we might like or the public might expect that, you know, come to public forum at the Mercury Bay Community Board, talk about a groin, we rush out there and do it.
Do it
You know,
tomorrow,
it's, you know, it's,
Can you do anything under urgency?
so you can do things under section
Even a
3.
temporary,
Section 330 of the RMA works under an emergency situation, but that needs to be as a result of an actual emergency. So like
And
a storm.
respectively, sorry to interrupt, you have to then go and apply for the consent.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
but
You might have to take it out again if they don't.
I guess
Yeah.
what I'd add to it is, I do accept that that club has always been put down with the proviso that it can
Yes.
be slid backwards. The reality of it, it's, you know, the type of club it is in the area that actually, you know, real boats take up. It wouldn't be the facility it is now if the building would have to slide back. I think that being one, I did take on board what the other comment that someone made is that it is on a raised hill. Once they erode that hill, it does drop away quite quickly, which will create other real serious issues, I imagine. That being said, you know, looking at and I know this is going on right through our community, but that club is a club that's really starting to move in town. And a lot of volunteers and people are putting a huge amount of time and investment into it. And I believe we should be seen to be trying to save it because I think it is a good green space. I mean, it is an iconic sailing club in New Zealand. I know that doesn't meet all the criteria, but
So the time frame of getting this work around trigger points and things like that, I mean, are we,
So that should,
got some urgency behind
yeah,
it?
there's definitely some urgency around that. So that's just a matter of weeks away probably. What I would anticipate is that we need to get that work done and then we need to start working on what the options are, looking at the options and the costs, because I don't disagree with what you're saying at all, Jeremy, but I suppose the issue for the community board is what is it going to cost? What are the options and what is it going to cost to save that bit of land and put something in place?
can I
Sorry,
just
then.
please,
hang on, just finish here and then Bill?
okay,
I was just going to say, is there a situation where it could be publicly funded? Like I guess even a temporary measure, because every metre we lose while this process happens, obviously, is terrible from a club's perspective.
Yeah.
So if, like Jonathan said, I think this morning, he said, you know, if there was funding available outside the council's budgets to put some temporary rocks in place or whatever it may be.
So there's no issue with having people do that. The issue comes back to the resource consent. You can't do anything.
You can't do anything until we get
without
that.
resource consent. So you've got to go through that process and that can be an extended process. I know that's frustrating and I know that, you know, that's hard for us to articulate and communicate to the public, you know, seeing things happening on the ground and wanting us to respond. So I totally understand that, but the way the RMA is set up, and we're bound by that, we've got to go through those processes.
So even under, sorry for my ignorance, but even under an emergency situation, you have to go through a resource consent.
So
I think we're
Respectively.
But there has to be an emergency as it's happening. So today, you couldn't go down there today and start doing something under that section 330 of the RMA because there's no imminent danger today of that club falling into the sea.
So if,
Because it has to be a hard structure falling into the sea, not land.
no.
Well, it is a reserve land, so reserve land gets eaten up all over the place. It's hard to go and say, look, we need to go and dump a whole load of rocks on the beach to protect some grass and sand.
Because I've had just had a survey, and my understanding, I don't know the exact year, but it's lost 14 metres.
Correct. That's true.
Yeah, and I've just had a survey, so what point is it urgent?
Yeah.
Because when next storm event, they could lose another 2 or 3 metres, and that's,
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, but it's the way the RMA is written. And as Rika said, you can get, you know, say we've got a storm come through tonight, we picked a whole load of rocks on the beach, then got to apply for a consent. Whether you'd actually get the consent or whether it'd be like you've gone through the process now, remove all those rocks, and then you basically haven't really achieved much. So you've got to go through the right process. You've got to look at the options. You've got to look at what's best on the site.
I just feel we're dragging our feet knowing that erosion will continue.
It's worse than
Well,
that,
we
Jeremy,
don't
because you can't go back. So what you're saying is right. We've lost 14 metres. That's absolutely
I've
right.
got you, Bill.
But what you can't do is go 14 metres out from there and build your protection.
No,
And that's the bit that's cruel.
yeah.
And the other part that Jonathan raised, so we know the people that would come down with trucks and diggers, they've probably got more trucks and diggers and hoppers and slot. They could come down there tomorrow morning with all the rocks and everything for free But we can't even do that because there's all the bloody health and safety bloody thing around it on public land. So we can't even condone that as much. We can make one phone call right now, and I'll tell you in half an hour the first truck will be down there doing exactly what we're talking about, but you can't do it.
Bill.
I'm just becoming a little bit disenchanted with the fact that both Jeremy and I apparently are on the foreshore management group. I can't see that it exists at the moment.
There was an update in here, I read.
It does exist.
Yes, phase 2 is starting.
This is only part of that process.
I understand that, but that's section 1.
There's a focus on establishing the coastal panels.
Yes, yes,
Over 60 expressions of interest have been received
Yes.
district-wide.
yes.
The first coastal panel meetings are intended to be held at the end of August. Aren't you guys supposed to be on these panels?
Supposed to be,
Right.
and we've had no information, or at least I haven't.
No.
Right,
Can you just
And
follow
the-
up with Amon?
I'll follow up with Amon.
Thank
So-
you.
right.
We'll come back to you.
And the other thing is that this is a district issue. It's not foreshore management or coastal erosion is a district thing.
Yeah, but it would make sense for them to come to their board to talk about.
I agree. And I encourage them to come because they're concerned. Everything that Jeremy has said is true. Everything that Tony has said is true. I go back to when Sam Marshall and Scotty and I sort of high tide down by the toilets opposite continuing care at high tide in the middle of the bloody night and saw all the exposed pipes, etc. And in the morning the trucks arrived and the buildings were saved. Now, the boating club, think that they're nearly at that situation. Surely we can get something happening prior to having to play the emergency card.
That's the problem. Can't.
Yeah,
Yeah, but we don't have an organisation that's doing it.
We do.
Well,
We do.
have we
Well, I
asked
think-
anyone to do a plan of?
It's been
We
done.
need to go back to what Bruce has said. So
Yep.
that work is in play.
Is it?
These trigger points are going to
Yep.
be established.
yes.
And then once it's been worked on urgently.
Yep.
And then we can obviously come back and
Look at
visit that.
options. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're
that-
saying
there- it
within
is in
6
hand.
weeks, 2 months,
Yep,
3
so I
years?
said, it's a matter of weeks, we'll have those trigger points calculated, then we need to
Okay.
look at options.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and then we need to bring the options back.
Yeah,
The situation is that, and I know we can sit here and say, look, we think, or we know,
Mm.
believe we know that erosion will continue to the club. We
yes,
don't actually know. It could start building up again. So because of that, it's not a definite. We can't say it's definitely going back. Therefore, we definitely can go under emergency works, go and do some rocks on the beach.
So
We
we-
can't do that. So
We've got a coastal engineer on the case.
coastal
Yeah.
scientist, yeah.
Coastal
yes.
scientist.
I'm not asking for work to be done under urgency.
No.
No, I'm saying make sure that there is a plan there, that everyone who is interested knows.
So we're working on that plan, and we've got 13 or 14 sites around the district, as Councillor
Yes.
Wallace mentioned before. So
Yes,
So we're doing what we can to
Okay.
work on that plan, and we know this is one of them.
Yes.
It's a high priority.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
I think that's the point is, I mean, I know that understandably there's a number of sites, but they probably, I'm sure you're doing it internally, but they do need to be prioritised.
correct, they do.
Correct. Can I just follow on from what we agreed at the last meeting, that we said that we would have a document of works that we're agreeing that would be produced by staff? I think this should be one of them that go on that list.
So it would make sense, and that will appear in your action schedule, and we'll get to that.
Yeah, so to say that, you know, Bruce is committing to coming back in a few weeks to say what are the key trigger points and what,
Yeah.
because I think we have to have some accountability, like some of the stuff we need to actually start ticking on.
I would agree with that.
I've got another comment on that too. So have we had any, so if this was a private property, so the homeowners, they basically put their wall in and then worry about it afterwards, and they've got other work done.
Yeah.
And that has to be reconsented
Retrospectively, yeah.
Mm,
yesterday, and we're still dealing with that problem because there's some other issues, and Alan's all over that.
mm.
And if it was, so they've paid for that wall. So is there any discussion we had with the boating club? Because at the end of the day, part of it is the reserve is there to come and go, and if it was without the boating club on it, we wouldn't be having this discussion. We might be having one with the homeowners about spending more money on their wall to bloody get over the end effect that Because that's what's actually caused the erosion. It's not what's happening. It's the homeowner's wall that's caused the problem we've got there now. Has there been any discussion with the boating club about any contribution they make? Because at the end of the day, it's their asset
To protect.
that they pay $350 a year for, whatever it is, for the privilege of being on public land.
Yeah.
And so that's one comment. Have we had that discussion? Are they of a mind to want to contribute to it, whatever the solution might be? But I think urgently we have to start getting comms out, and that's front page on every local paper and regional paper to say coastal erosion, a massive issue for the district to be dealing with. We have identified 14 priority sites and we're working on those. But as a ballpark figure, 1 kilometre of protection, whether it be geotech, whether it be rock, whether it be, those are probably the two obvious ones, costs roughly this much money. And if we did that tomorrow morning, the rating impact will be. We have to start getting messages out there about what the cost of doing stuff is, because people, we can fix this tomorrow morning, but I tell you, you won't do it for under $250 a year on everybody's rate bill. You will not do it that cheap. Because we know what it, well, I've got a rough idea, it's roughly $2 million for rocks for a kilometre, roughly. So we need to start softening the community up to the fact that, yes, we're addressing it. It's frustratingly slow by the time you deal with the RMA and the consenting bodies. But just be mindful, when we get over that hurdle, the cost to you is going to be this.
Depending on how it's done, groins could be an option.
No, that's what I'm saying.
We understand that the work is in place.
Yeah.
We can't debate it now. I take your point that understanding that the costs for all of these things are not cheap. So we'll leave it with Bruce. We'll get it on our action schedule. He's going to come back and that piece of work will be done. So that will be fantastic.
But can I get the minutes to, again, strongly word the comms on coastal erosion and the indicative costs to arrest it? And when we say what is the indicative cost to arrest it, what does that transpire or transport to be the rating impact? Because if it's in there, again, I can actually talk to that council to say, we need to start telling people, if you want to fix up floods and you want to get more drinking water, you want to get more of anything, there's a cost. We just don't do it. We wait till we get to the rates demand, and then we have the discussion on the annual plan, and we hear what we heard this year. So long as that's in there, I will do my best again to try and progress this.
And Jen's saying she's picked up on that. It will go on our action schedule as well.
Perfect.
It will be captured.
Thanks, Jen.
Okay. Any other comments on the work programme?
I was just going to ask for the action.
We're getting to that.
It's in here.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Yep, we'll get to that. Right. No other.
No, I'm happy now.
Okay, so all those, did we need to receive this report and did we have a? Oh, we just need to receive the report.
I'll move.
Okay. Seconded.
I'll second.
Thanks, Bill. All right.
And just to note that even though I've had to shoot out, I have read that report.
Fantastic. All right, so that takes us to item 3.1, which is the
I'll move.
draft Mercury Bay Reserves Management Plan on page 317. Moved by Tony, seconded by Delly. Thank you. Right, any comments? Any discussion? Yeah, who have we got on the TV?
Faith and Emma. Good
Hi.
morning. Good morning.
Good morning, welcome.
Thank you.
They can just give me direction when they want it up.
Yes, so we'll hand over to you to get on with your presentation.
Wonderful. Jen, are you happy to do the driving and we'll just let you know when to click? Is that okay?
I think we'll be a good team on that. Yep.
Great, thank you.
So,
So I wanted to start off just while Jen's getting the presentation up to just say a really big thank you to everyone who's been involved to date in drafting this reserve management plan. Obviously yourselves, we spent a few hours with you last month workshopping this, so wanted to thank you for your attention and input into this process, as well as the Mercury Bay area staff. They've been really generous with their time and knowledge in this process. The Mercury Bay field representatives, so the people who are out there doing it, really was valuable feedback in this process. And of course, we can't forget the community members and key stakeholders who have also contributed their time, of course, voluntary into this process. So I just wanted to start with a wee thank you. So if we could have a click, please, Jen. A lot of this, the first few slides and a lot of the report itself will be quite familiar to you. This is information that we included in the workshop papers in the earlier part of this year. But since this is the public forum to discuss this, we thought it important to just go over these key high-level points. So as you know, the Mercury Bay Reserve Management Plan is a different approach, the review that is being undertaken at the moment to what has previously been undertaken in the Mercury Bay area. We're following the precedent that the general policies and the other coast, so the Thames Coast and the Coromandel Coalwall Reserve Management Plans took, which dictates to us a bit of a process and a format for the document itself. And the other big change for Mercury Bay is that it's in one document, whereas previously it was in three, separated out across the area. So click please, Jen. This is an overdue process. The Whitianga and Wharikauhau and the Mercury Bay South plans were made in 2007 and the Mercury Bay North was made in 2008. And DOC does suggest that it's a 10-year review. So while that's not legislatively required, it is best practice. So once we get this sorted, we'll be back on track. The Reserves Act does guide a lot of this process, as well as the content of the plans themselves. And this is just quite a pertinent section that I wanted to present to you today. So the bolded parts is that the management plan, so we're talking about the use, enjoyment, maintenance, protection and preservation for the purposes of which the reserve is classified. And so you'll remember that the classification process was a big piece of work that took a bit more time than we had anticipated. There was over 600 parcels in the Mercury Bay area to consider, comparing to neighbouring neighbouring areas. The Whangamata has around 200, so we're dealing with, what's that, 150% more than your neighbours. So a big undertaking. Next slide, please, Jen. This is just an overview of the process to date. We have completed stages 1 and 2, which is very exciting. Just a few points there that we've got the conversations with iwi are ongoing. There's actually a memory stick on the way to you, Heather, to share with Joe from Ngāti Hei of the draft plan. And so thank you very much for your ongoing support in having these conversations with local iwi. The other outstanding part from stage 2 is, of course, the maps. The report noted that the maps that are currently within the draft reserve management plan that you have on your agenda are placeholders only. Those are being finalised as we speak, and they'll be ready for the council agenda deadline next week. Next slide, please, Jen. So these are the next stages in the next slide. Still on the one back. Yeah. We've got the call for submissions next, then followed by hearings and, of course, approving the final plan. This process will be quite familiar to you. It follows a lot of the formal consultation processes that council has to undertake for the likes of annual plans and long-term plans, with the main difference is that it's a 2-month period for submissions, which lets the community have a really good crack at reading this quite detailed document and being able to provide their feedback. So that just has the dates that are reflected in the report there, just as a bit of a reminder of where we're anticipating the process will track if everything goes according to plan. So next slide, please. As you're aware, we had some targeted pre-consultation undertaken in Whitianga in early July. We got in just in between the two lockdowns while we were in stage 1, so that was quite good. We did have a lot of feedback received on from the community who are really passionate about very specific reserves in their areas. Most of the feedback was operational, which the reserve management plan is not able to reflect in that level of detail, but that feedback has been passed on, so it will not be lost, because of course people did take time out of their days to come and speak to us about this. But where it was appropriate, it was the key themes and issues that were presented by the public were incorporated into the draft management plan. So it was a very worthwhile exercise, and we feel that it's definitely increased the where's the word? Increased the
Engagement?
Yeah, and also the oh man, it's just completely gone from my head.
The value of the document?
Yeah, it's increased the level of the documents, made it better. Here we go. Brain farts. So the next slide is the one that is the new stuff we're starting to get in. So we obviously talked to you last month around the specific crunchy issues that we wanted to talk to you about in the reserve management plan, relating predominantly to commercial activities, concessions and events. And I might hand over to Faith before further words fail me to talk more about what we did in response to your feedback. Thanks, Faith.
So I recall that we had a bit of discussion around Taylor's mistake with regards to events that occur on that reserve. Now, this is not commercial activities, this is actually events. And there was a request from the board to include some wording around that any applications for events that they came to the board for recommendation. We've gone back and just fleshed that out a bit, and events have never needed to go to a full council meeting for approval. They've always been done under our delegation as staff. So staff can approve the events, but what we did, and you will notice in Taylor's mistake, we did a bit of wordsmithing. So what we've sort of said is that applications for events will come to the community board for review, and then we will take on board any comments that come back. So we're just anticipating that this won't be a full report. It might be something like I'm not quite sure, sort of like an informal sort of document spreadsheet or something that says, in October, we've got this happening on Taylor's mistake. So it's more of an information sharing thing. We just need to know that the board's happy with that approach. And if not, what you'd suggest. As far as the commercial operators, which are our concessions, so this is our leases and licences.
If you go next slide, Jen, they'll have a bit more information on that one.
Yeah, that does need council approval, so we'll just follow the process as we've always done, where they come to the board first of all. Staff make their recommendation, it comes to the board and then gets signed off by full council. So yeah, that's just a little bit of background for that.
So these are the other changes. So Faith has already spoken on the Taylor's mistake change. And in addition to the reserves on the previous slide, we've got restrictions of commercial activities to the Kotunu Recreation Reserve and the Bluff Road Reserve in Matarangi. So that covers all of the reserves where the board felt that there needed to be an additional level of restriction well, not so much restriction, but investigation before commercial activities are put on the reserves.
Emma, we've just got one question in the room. Is it okay to take questions now?
Yeah, wonderful. Absolutely.
Tony?
Emma, my question is, if the reserve management policy is, I was going to say well written, we'll assume it's well written. If we have a policy, then you should be able to approve something at a community level without council permission, because the council has adopted the policy, and that should set up the guideline upon which you make decisions. And I raised that because I've got some other questions, but I raised that is, and you've already alluded to it, Mercury Bay has over $3 million. It has 1.5 times more than Whangamata and 4 times more than anybody else. And they're funded locally. So on the basis that they're locally funded, the decision should be done locally.
That's a good point.
And it also raises the other question for me is that I was going to raise is, do we know who uses these reserves? Because my view is that they should be funded districtly. We let out a district contract to mow them and maintain them, but fund them locally. And I just think Mercury Bay bears an undue burden, given that these things are often used by people that aren't Mercury Bay ratepayers. But anyhow, that's only a comment, but it's really about the policy. I just don't think we need permission of council for our staff in Mercury Bay to make a decision about whether we should or shouldn't hold an activity.
Yeah, so when we talk about council approval and the both the Mercury Bay Reserve Management Plan and the general policies, we say council approval as in from TCDC. So that can be a staff decision that's delegated.
No.
Is that not the case?
No. So council approval is council approval.
Oh yes, through the of course. Yeah.
Permission from council is staff. With feedback, of course, from the community board, etc., or other key stakeholders. So, I think I understand what you're saying, Tony. I think it's important to make the distinction between events, whether they be commercial or non-commercial, and commercial operators' licences for which also fit into the same category as leases as well. So an event is generally a one-off thing, so they're not happening consistently. You could argue that some of them are, so they might be one day a month, every month. So for example, a market, but generally they're one-off things. And whereas a commercial operator's licence is consistent use of a reserve for a certain period of time, often just over the busy holiday period, but so every 5 days a week or whatever, a commercial operator is using that reserve for commercial gain. So there's that distinction. And I think that's where it comes down to how the policies have been written. So when it's that consistent use of a reserve for commercial gain by a commercial operator. So in other words, they're using the reserve instead of a premises that they might have to pay for otherwise, like an office in this town or whatever, then it does need council approval, which is our full council. And then when it's an event, which is usually a one-off thing, we can make a really good, through the council staff, we can make a really good decision about that on the spot, with regards to what the effects are, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't need to go to council. Is that kind of where you're going, Tony, or you more?
Well, from my view is, if it's funded locally, and it is, the decision should be made locally. So if someone comes to this community board with a request to use it for whatever reason, and the community board considers that and either thinks it's a good idea or another one, then if Alan, as staff, and applying our policy says that's a go ahead, that's where it should stop. To my mind, it should go there. If the district are paying the bills and managing the policy, then by all means go to Thames. But I don't need someone in the Thames Community Board or Thames councillor contributing in any way to what we can do on our reserves, which we pay for. That's my, so if the policy is robust, all that's accounted for, we don't need to go anywhere. Our area manager should be able to make that decision knowing that he's working within council policy and our reserve management plans. That's just my comment. Because for me, I'm going to be raising it again later. I think reserves should be district funded because we don't have any control over how much we pay the contractor to mow them or how often. That's done in the reserve management contract, and yet we pay the bill. If you hear where I'm coming from.
And it's probably a conversation that Bruce needs to hear as well.
Yeah, he will. But anyhow, I'm relaxed about this thing's got a long way to go yet, and the plans will go out and the community will provide their input and we will listen to that and then we'll finalise the plan. So this, there's not a drop dead.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think Tony's point's very valid, isn't it?
Yeah, really.
So, yeah, need to capture that, sure.
So would it be the community board's preference for all concessions granted in the Mercury Bay area to be made, the decision to be made by the community board and not go to council? Is that your preference?
But
I don't think
now.
our delegations allow for that though. I think it has to be, I think you have to go back to your terms of.
Yeah, so we will investigate that. But I do have a feeling that might be, but we'll investigate that. Appreciate
However,
you.
if you go and change it and fund reserves as a function of district, then I'm very relaxed with item number 3. But unless that changes, I'm not happy with it. I don't know what you think, Alan. I might be wrong. I understand reserves are funded locally. So if they're funded locally, the decisions are made locally. It's as simple as that. And I
So
will.
point 3 talks about permission from council staff. So the council,
That's right. Yeah. But we don't even need to go there. We can do that in our office here as far as I'm concerned.
Next slide.
Yes, please, thank you. This slide talks to how reserves that are subject to treaty settlement are treated in the reserve management plan. There are 2 which are subject to treaty settlement specifically. They are included in Appendix C of the reserve management plan and are included for information only, so they don't form part of the document that's open for submission. The approach that the other plans have taken is that post-settlement a separate management plan will be prepared, but until that time the current reserve management plan, so that's from the 2007 or 2008 documents, will remain in force. That's just a wee note, so they'll be at the very end of that draft document you may have spotted. So next slide, Jen. The other thing that we wanted to draw your attention to is in the reserve management plan, there's 2 reserves which have been identified as potential opportunities for council to consider disposal. The reserve management plan doesn't require that they be disposed. It's identified as a opportunity as opposed to written in blood. And just to remind you what those 2 reserves are, I've just popped a wee picture there. You may recall from our workshop that we talked about the Jack Mills Reserve, that lovely wee slither of land there. And then the other one is, it's the very creatively named Cook Drive number 245. Next
Do we
slide,
have
Jen.
values asked down where that bloody market is? So we can't do anything about it because of the reserve. Do we have any idea of value of that land?
No.
I'd be interested to find out what the value is, because there goes an opportunity to offset the development of another reserve in this town for an event.
And that would definitely be part of the investigations into the disposal. One of them would be finding out what it would be worth, yeah.
Yes,
Alrighty.
sorry, got one more question here from Jeremy.
Hi guys. I just want to have girls and guys, everyone's a guy. Apologies. I did raise this point when you first met. I guess with obviously going through this process, I guess there's always the concern that we feel we have to change our reserves and pull them up with different structures, whatever it may be. I guess the question I have is if on any of these particular reserves, how does the process happen if someone decided they wanted to come and put a memorial seat or a barbecue? Does this reserves management plan on each particular reserve, what is the process of that? And secondly, this new Reserve Management Act, I guess, is it slanted in a way that it's promoting development of reserves, or is it slanted the other way? If that makes sense.
Okay, I'll answer the first question for you. So about, for example, the memorial seats or whatever on a reserve, we do have policy in the general policies document which guides how we should be treating those applications. In the past, it's been a little bit ad hoc. We should actually be recording exactly who the memorial seat, for example, is for, because some of them apparently we don't even now, 10 years down the track, we don't even know who they were for. But we are mindful of that, and it is something that as staff we are going to be more diligent in recording. So yes, there is policy that directs to how we deal with that. So we're not going to put that into every single individual reserve management plan. We'll just rely on that broader policy about memorial seats, etc. And sorry, your second question was about the Reserves Act. Is that what you were saying? How that?
Yeah, I guess.
The Reserves Act is very specific about. And I think Emma had brought it up in one of the first couple of slides about however the reserve is classified determines how we should be basically at a real, top broad level looking after that reserve. So it should be protecting those values that are reflected in the primary purpose of that reserve. So, for example, if it's been classified as a recreation reserve, then you would say the values of that is, providing space to recreate and also, facilities that would aid that. So it could be, public toilet facility, or it could be netball courts or whatever. As opposed to a reserve that has been classified as a historic reserve, which, so the primary purpose of that reserve is obviously it's really important because of some historical something that's happened to it or whatever. It's got I'm lost for words now. But what
historical
I'm trying to say,
significance.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. So the classification of the reserves and the Reserves Act kind of gives you that real top level. This is what we should be thinking about with reserves that have been classified as that. The categories in the Reserve Management Plan. So you'll find in each reserve there's a classification under the Reserves Act, and then there's a category. The categories are about how we will manage those reserves, and they are cognizant of the classification. So basically you'll find that there's a lot of, for example, esplanade reserves that are non-maintained, And we know that that's exactly how we want to keep them, because a lot of them are just strips adjacent to a river, sometimes out in the back and beyond. And we don't necessarily, well, we won't propose any kind of development of those reserves. We'll just sort of leave them be. Primarily, they're most likely there just to provide that old, what was referred to, Queen's Chain, or public access along the river, or whatever. So, yeah. So I guess the answer to your question is that the Reserves Act is not promoting large-scale development of reserves. What it is promoting that we appreciate the values of the reserve and then manage them accordingly.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any more slides?
I'll just add to that, Jeremy, on page 447 of the agenda paper, or page 120 of the draft reserve management plan, in Appendix A, there is there we go, overview of Reserve Act classifications, which goes into detail about what the Reserve Act says for each specific classification, which will give you further guidance as to what the Act says.
Because some of the ones that are, without reviewing everyone in detail, some of them could be argued that they part of the parcel could be recreational, part of it could be classified as another area, and I see some of them are just, they have the generic classification recreational. Where a particular reserve, especially if it goes over a long stretch of space, can change, but
Yes.
I guess that's evaluated at the time.
Yeah. And there will be reserves that have multiple parcels, and each parcel may be a different classification. So they're all built in, try and all get along together. So this just outlines the structure of the reserve management plan. As we mentioned when we were talking about the reserves subject to treaty settlement, there's other reserves in Appendix C as well, which we've just called open areas that are not reserved. So they may be areas of road reserve or fee simple land, for example. Also things that are considered the foreshore. But for all intents and purposes, they look like a reserve, and we maintain it. So that's there more just for completeness. For a reader who is looking for their local reserve, it may not be captured as a reserve, but we still wanted to reflect those areas in the plan. So that's where they sit. A classic example for Whitianga is Brophy's Beach. That's in open spaces. So, for example, if you were looking for your Brophy's Beach management plan, it would look a bit funny if we hadn't included it, because it's quite an important local reserve, which isn't a reserve. The Appendix B is another area where they are reserves, but they're not actively maintained by council. So those are the likes of the Esplanade reserves that Faith was mentioning. We just leave them alone because they are, alongside a river or a stream, alongside the ocean. So we don't actively maintain them, but they are included in the plan anyway.
We've got another question in the room. Sorry.
No, wonderful.
Tony.
So it's just, I was going to ask this later, so it's timely now, is because there's a lot of, has been for a long time, a lot of discussion on coastal erosion.
Yes.
And one of the most significant issues we have is people go to the trouble of pushing the sand up, and we go to the trouble of volunteers planting it, but we don't have sufficient budget to maintain it. So what happens is this area gets overtaken by weeds, which actually either damage or kill off or don't support the sand to the degree that the specialist plants do, notwithstanding the rodents that turn up in it. And so a comment I have is that, when I've read through all these, the one thing that's missing in it is the maintenance. So what is our commitment to maintain our reserves? But these coastal ones particularly, we're beating our head against a brick wall promoting a soft option, which I might add I in the camp that favours, if we don't maintain them. So they need significant budgets to look after that. And when I say that, that is a budget, so once a month someone can go down there and take all the weeds out and replace any of the plants that go missing and enable us to actually replace some of the sand to keep doing it. Because that to me is the weakness of our coastal erosion management, is we do work, then we walk away from it. Now, that's a bit of a loose term, because we don't really walk away from it, but there simply isn't the money, and we probably don't have the consent, probably doesn't give us enough sand to shift around. But yeah, if you don't maintain it, we may as well not done it in the first place. And here we are, Buffalo Beach, because it's one you mentioned, is the one that we've got the problem with right now. And so I'd like to make sure that when these things go in, there's a budget. Now, I know that's going to increase the cost, but the council has got to start to accept it costs money to look after stuff, and the people that pay that are ratepayers. But yeah, I just mentioned that because that's the bit that's missing in this stuff to me.
And it is intentionally missing from the reserve management plan. The reserve management plan has avoided directly directing the work program for each particular area.
Okay.
What you're mentioning about an increased budget, you're absolutely right, and that's the conversation that you have around your budget times when you're deciding on your work program. What the reserve management plan needs to do is enable those decisions to be made based on the needs and wants and also the constraints, be it financial or otherwise, of the community board at the time.
Okay, I'll pick that up.
So the last slide is something that we've already mentioned, but just very quickly, we've got the mapping that's under development. They will all look the same. They'll all be very clear about what we're talking about. And at the same time, we're also undergoing to update the online GIS mapping software. So that means that the really useful mapping software will be updated and will reflect the new reserve management plan. So that's a bonus of undertaking this additional work, that it will be reflected in the database. So last slide there, Jen. This is just a reminder of my amazing PowerPoint skills. You are here. So what we're asking you today is to recommend the draft for public consultation for council. Council will then, if all goes well, on the 15th of September, do the tick for public consultation, and then we'll be able to flow on through the consultation period hearings. We'll check in with you after the consultation has happened, and then take a final to council in March. So thank you very much for your attention and your time this morning and for your questions and comments. Was there anything further that you'd like to discuss with us today?
I've just got one comment, and that's under public consultation. In the order paper here on page 322, you talk about a public notice being issued in the Hauraki Herald.
Yes.
Now, I just think I don't get that delivered to my house here. I don't know anybody that gets it delivered here in Whitianga. I wonder whether the Informer might be a better choice.
Just no, absolutely. We need, so the reason that the Hauraki Herald is specifically mentioned in the report is that the Reserves Act require it to be a district-wide distribution, and we should have included the Informer there as well, and that absolutely would be the case.
Okay,
be doing
fantastic.
a double. Thank you.
But do you have a list of all those papers? Like Matarangi have their own paper, which I think comes out monthly. I'd also suggest even going to ratepayer associations to get them to include it in their newsletters,
Yes.
given that that's where the consultation is driven from.
Yep, I
Yes,
agree.
absolutely. And we will be actually tomorrow, once we've got some direction from you will be going back to the key stakeholders, which included all of the ratepayer groups and the reserve management groups, just letting them to progress. So they will be included in any communication. So thank you for that that note.
Okay, thank you. Were there any other questions of the ladies? Hey, thanks so much for your presentation. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, very good.
Nice
Thank
and
you.
clear, thank you.
Yes, okay, so we had a mover and seconder? Yep. All those in favour?
Aye.
Opposed? There being none? Carried. Fantastic. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you very much.
Okay, which takes us to item 6.2, which is our action schedule, which is on page 488.
You got the ceiling for it, haven't you?
Duke ceiling we did straight.
Okay, yes, heavy. Something.
Yeah, we just left
We
that.
deferred that.
Yeah,
Good, sorry.
no, that's okay.
Please put it into the document we can work on through by popular demand.
Okay, yes. Back by popular demand,
Which page again? 480?
488.
Great document, by the way.
I think this is a fantastic suggestion and very clearly laid out.
Yep.
So I'm personally pleased that it's back. Do you want to go through it item by item, or do people just want to bring things up that they,
I think it's pretty clear.
yeah? I had one question, and I don't know, the PGF application for ultra fast broadband at Horta Beach?
I was looking again, and this is a list.
No, well, that's what I was, do you want to go through item by item?
Well, you know, Bill raised the thing about the workshop on shoreline management. Staff
Yes.
advised that members will be advised of who the people are.
Yeah.
So that
So no confirmed date for this meeting was provided,
No,
okay? So,
and so what I understand is there's two Thames councillors and myself at district
yes,
to have oversight's not the right word, but to be
Project governance.
that side of it from at district level. But what Bill's raised is the people are in, if you take Mercury Bay, who are the people who are on that group, which will produce information that'll come forward to the oversight governance group. That's open.
Yep.
So I notice it's here,
Yeah.
but no date yet.
It's all open.
yeah,
Okay.
and it's open.
Firstly, nice work, Jen. I think it's exactly
Yeah.
what we need. The only point I might raise is obviously it gives an action where it's in process, but we don't have an expected date on delivery. Is there, or am I missing that?
Sometimes I'm given that information and sometimes I'm not, but if we want.
It's pretty hard to quantify sometimes.
Is it though? Well, even if we put an indicative date, at some point, I mean, because this document could just drag on forever.
Like the end of
There is no end.
September or.
I think you just capture that, I just capture that in the notes.
I'd like to.
Agenda's reliant on the people she's chasing to
That's right.
give her
We
those
are
dates,
reliant
so.
on-
And I think they need to be realistic timelines, you know, obviously based on staff's workload, but I do feel that we need some finite date to work to, because it also must help with agenda setting for workshops. Because a lot of these items on here are workshop items, right? And how do we set,
Yes, right.
how do we achieve the workshop if we don't know when to report or
Generally, with the way this works is that I note kind of shorter timelines. So if you have asked for a report at this meeting, that will go on this, and you will likely, and we really do push that that report will appear on the following agenda. Those longer deadline things, probably the action schedule is not the best place for them. And I think that sometimes that's put into the work program. And I'll try to make that clear. I think at first when we introduced this, there was a bit of a mix-up or there was a bit of overlap, and we are trying to keep it separate. So if it's a short, like I noted, you gave a lot of good actions today, and I noted those down. They'd be things that you want reports on. I'm hoping that this, you're going to soon see that this is these ones on the second channel don't lag, they don't take long, they're kind of,
Right.
they're quicker, although this might this one might have a few in progress. You'll see that they close pretty quickly on this action schedule, and I'll push to make sure that that happens.
Yeah.
Longer ones, I'll make sure that they're communicated and shown on the work program if appropriate.
And also, Jim, what I'm hearing is that if we have a timeline ourselves, we can set a deadline, like we would like this to happen by the next workshop or the next full board meeting.
And then-
So we can actually suggest a deadline.
And that's great feedback for me, because I can take that and when I put it in the action where it's explained, and I'll say, and board requested this by this date.
Yes,
So we can team up on that for sure.
yeah, awesome, thank you.
So if an action point comes out of this, you direct it to the right, correct staff, is that how it's working? And this is a generic document that everyone sees inside staff?
Yeah, so after this
Yeah.
meeting, I prepare a bit of an email and I send out and share it to all the staff who probably have a
Right.
stake in it, and they'll respond back to me, and then sometimes I have to do follow-up calls, and I'm happy to do that.
Fantastic.
So yeah, Jennifer collates all of that and deals with it pretty quickly from after our meetings, with whatever has come up. We usually get together straight afterwards with Alan and go through anything that's been raised and follow up from there.
Okay, so do we have my question was, do we have an understanding of when we'll hear back around the PGF application for Hogwood Beach or passport ban?
Can we just ask Kirsten, do you know anything
I
about it?
haven't
on your
heard
team?
an update.
I wonder if they'll make announcements before the election.
There's not many Labour votes there. Unless Jeremy's changed sides.
I guess we just wait till.
Yeah, we'll just see if we can find that out at some stage.
I guess we just wait till the PGF people come back with the response, because it's not a council.
No, that's right. I just wondered whether there was actually, you submit on this date and we'll let you all know by this date sort of thing.
Just text Yvonne, she might come back with an answer.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kirsten.
Anyone have any other points they want to raise?
That's very good.
I just want to say that this particular item that came from a public forum, Mr. Tom Riddle, I just want to tell you that I've been engaging with him over the phone. We have connected him with our relatively newly appointed coastal scientist, and that's in progress, and he's been a real pleasure to work with him. We will try to get some more answers from him.
Interesting.
Top man.
Excellent, thank you. So do we have a name for our new coastal scientist?
Jamie Boyle.
Jamie Boyle, all right.
Nice guy too.
I've got you, Min.
Yeah, no, we met him yesterday. He's a very keen, good young man.
I think at some stage we'll get them on to.
Yeah, I was going to ask if that's
introduce
nice.
himself.
If that would be nice.
We talked about that yesterday, and said we'll get him out and about.
Is he based in Thames?
He lives in Tauranga, and he's based in Thames, yeah, and a bit of remote.
Yeah.
Remote working option.
He pops in here reasonably
Oh, good.
often, yeah.
And just because this is a bit of a refresher, so when it says closed, you'll see it at the meeting that it's closed, and then of course the next meeting it won't appear. So this is like one and only, when you see it closed, it's done and dusted. And it's off for the next.
Yeah,
Nice work.
okay.
But I do keep record, I do have a big master one, so if ever you wanted to know, contact me and I've got that information.
All right, did we have a mover and a seconder for this report? Did we do that?
No, I don't think so.
I'll move.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Seconded by Jeremy, fantastic.
Jen, just on it, if we want to access it between meetings, what's the best way? Can we access this document?
I can give you a copy or.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
good.
absolutely.
Just.
And it
it's
appears
good.
in order paper.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you want a
something
separate
outside
one?
it, Yeah.
Yeah, I actually work in this, but I've got an Excel spreadsheet that I'm happy to share.
Good, thank you.
Okay, members' reports. So which end would we like to start at?
Well,
Bill,
it's always last.
not today, Bill. You're-
I just thought I'd,
Today is the day.
no.
What's happening?
Not a heck of a lot. I attended the WRC meeting at the boating club and was waylaid and lambasted by one or two people who came to the meeting today, I'm pleased to say. Can I say that I was impressed with the Commodore? He's talking about all these people and all these volunteers, etc. And I thought, what do you do? But however, that's not going to help the situation. The main concern that they have is the erosion thing. And they've said what they've said. And I invited them to attend
Fantastic. that they-
because I'm tired of people bleating in my ear and expecting me to do everything for them when they should grow up and stand up. John Evans was relatively docile this morning, which was a pleasant surprise. It really was, yeah. However, I'm pleased that they're there. The other thing that's on the table, and I spoke briefly to the important gentleman here about the water warehouse that Brian Stewart, who was my neighbour for 25 years in Auckland and was holiday home and is a neighbour again. And I've asked Bruce to, if he wouldn't mind, there has been a response which I've sent to him telling that a document exists and it's in the team and he will be getting a direct response, hopefully. I have no feel for the project, and just briefly, if you're not sure what he was talking about in the water warehouse, was at times when the flow is sufficient to maintain reserve levels, or reservoir levels, and there are times that most of the water goes to sea. He says, let's make a building and store it. Now, that in its very simple terms is a sort of a reservoir in town.
Isn't that a water tank?
Well, one could, I'm not going to go there.
Not a building.
He's talking about a building, all right?
Oh.
Okay.
Sounds like a reservoir.
Yes.
Yes.
So
If you're going to construct a
reservoir or dam.
like that.
Yes.
You don't want raw water reservoir.
Greece. However, because I know how sensitive this is, the document exists. I've had one response through Jennifer from one of the people who's mentioned that there is no budget, which we knew, so there's no surprises there. The question is whether or not it has any validity for further examination. And I think that that's outside of my sphere of knowledge, and I don't know whether it's practical or impractical, affordable, desirable, or possible. He makes comments that it may not require resource consent. He might very well be right, but I couldn't comment. I don't know. When staff get round to reading the letter and making responses, I'll be very happy.
Staff have been through the letter.
And they have responded.
They have responded, I think.
I've had one response that I've had a copy, yeah.
Yeah, I'll follow up and make sure that it's the customer.
Yes.
But they've definitely been through the detail on the.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether it's even worthy of going to a level of investigation. I would certainly like to think any response that is negative should be carefully written.
Yes.
Yes, because I think Derek did a very good job of smacking the people's hands up and muttering.
Oh, right.
So that encroachment letter, he was,
I didn't see that.
it was a brilliant document.
I'll get my hands on that. Is that it?
That's
Yeah,
an idea.
Thank you.
Righto, from me. I have had like a request from the Lions, really. They're trying to find a place to put a barbecue, like our ones, in memory of Malcolm Brown.
Yes.
And they're suggesting Robinson Road or somewhere around the boat ramp. So I just don't, like, for me personally, there's no cost to us at all. And maybe around the boat ramp or down there or somewhere where the path goes through would be a pretty reasonable place for people to go. And all I'd suggest is wherever it goes, there should be a toilet within easy walking distance. Because that's our Achilles heel where we have these things. So that's come, or I've just said that you need to come and make that proposal to the community board, and they'll find out if there's a place you can use and that process. I went to the Business After 5 meeting on the 23rd, and that was, who else was there?
I was there.
Yeah, fantastically attended, and there's no question under Milan's guidance, the place, the business association is going really well. Milan, I know, is saying to get on the burned out side, so I just think he is a person worth staying alongside and trying to encourage and help, because it's his energy that's driving this thing, and by and large is a really, really positive group in what we are doing. So that was good. The police meeting on the 13th, that was very, very well attended. I thought it was a pretty good meeting. Obviously, it's been constructed, but it's worthy to have the message out that Whitianga has the lowest crime rate in the Coromandel, possibly the lowest crime rate in New Zealand. The crime is really domestic violence, most of which is alcohol related, and theft. And the drugs are well known, but the message that has to go out is if people have a concern, they need to ring the police. And if they don't like to ring the police, there's an alternative police number. And if they don't do that, ring Crime Stoppers. But one person stood up at the meeting and said, well, I know where they're cooking and stuff, but I'm scared to tell anyone because I don't want to come and burn me out. Well, sell story. If you don't know what's going on around you, you can't act. And the police need 3 independent, almost verifiable complaints before they can activate the search warrant. There are other ways they could do it. They could come via us and get our compliance people to go and knock on the door and say, I believe you've got a dog, and I'm just here to check your registration. And meanwhile, the police are with them because they don't want to get knocked over. There is other ways of getting around it, but if you really want to get around it, we've got to make sure people understand you've got to take ownership of this problem, and the police will only do what they know about, and they have to have enough to know about. They just can't get a warrant and knock your door down. So yeah, I thought it was good, but I think it'd be useful for us. I know we've tried to have the police here at our meetings.
It's an open item on our action report, actually, to invite them.
So the information I'd like, if nothing else, is an overview of the community is looking pretty good, and we've had a couple of problems, and it's the stats, because that graph, well, not a graph, it was a chart they put up that showed the squares where each event had happened. So anyone looking at that could see every single street in Whitianga. What they said is, in any other town in New Zealand, you would not know where that was, because the whole thing is obliterated with events. Yes. So contrary to what we might think, there are no real problems here. They are well managed, and the police are doing, they got their people where they need them, basically. So I'll leave that at that. I keep raising about comms. We need to keep going out, because we've just heard Ed go today some other stuff. What is the state of infrastructure? What are the costs associated with it? And what do those costs translate when you talk about the rates? Every month a bloody paper goes out, that should be in there, so we start to ingrain that in the community's head. There's nothing for nothing. And my last comment, so this will be on my members' report, and again I'll raise that at the council meeting. In terms of district versus local, so community empowerment, the simple way I look at it is, if we pay the bills, we have the say. And so that issue I raised about reserves, we have the most in the district, not all used by Mercury Bay ratepayers, not by long shot. 1.5 times more than Waimatar, 4 or 5 times more than anyone else. And yet district decides how much we're going to pay to look after and whatever. So my personal view is reserves should be a function of district, unless people in this room think otherwise, if the district are going to run the budget. So I don't want my life run by somebody else. If I'm in charge of it, I want the lot. So I just leave that at that for me. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to go over some of the stuff that Tony's already talked about. I also attended the police meeting. I talked about exactly what Tony talked about. I mean, the town, from a national perspective, is pretty, our crime rate is right down there. I think a couple of the guys, I think one was Rupert, they're pretty proactive. I think it's up to us as a town to be proactive. 105, I think, was one of the channels that they said to really use. And if we've got anything suspicious in the community, get onto it early, and they seem to act what they did with the mob members in town. I think that was a pretty successful model how that played out, and they were pretty proactive after Ms. Vandra got onto them. So reiterate, I think we're a safe town, but we need to keep vigilant. We talked about the boating club erosion. Bruce has given a commitment to start looking at it pretty heavily.
Continue
to look at it. I got called to a local meeting in Hahei. The Harrison report came out on wastewater and water in Hahei. It was a little bit awkward because I hadn't been shared the report. So I guess in the future it'd be nice for us as elected members to have that information, because I sort of felt a bit stupid when they were sending me the report.
Yeah, I've spoken with my team about that.
Yeah, so that'd be helpful in the future.
So the Stephen Holthouse response to that, I thought was also very productive. I don't know if you've had that.
Yes, I did get,
Okay.
he did copy it, and I guess, I don't know where this stands, but as an observer, am I able to be part of the workshops? And I think there's some meetings coming up. I guess that's just a request.
Absolutely.
It's good. I again reiterate, it's interesting fact for me that we have 600 reserves under our ward. And I think the closest next is 200, and we locally fund it. And when you think about that, probably in principle not quite right. So I'm pleased you're going to push that, Tony, to see if we can look at that as a district operational cost. I don't know if that's a realistic thing, but it makes a lot of sense, because obviously a lot of people benefit from it, but we're actually covering it. Drinking fountains, I shared a photo. I was down in Owakuni earlier in the year, or a month ago, and they had a stainless steel drinking fountain. Looks good at Bruce in the room. It was sponsored by Veolia, and we've discussed it internally in the board, but whether it would be a realistic option to look at some, maybe possibly these type of sponsored fountains throughout the town, and maybe we start with one.
Is that something Lions might like to do?
Eh?
Is that
And I
something
think
Lions might like to do instead of a barbecue?
I've had some chats with the team around Veolia doing a similar thing. We did do, there's a couple of teams.
Yep,
Getting
okay.
it done, so so definitely keen to expand those if possible. The focus has come off those a little bit with COVID, because obviously during that incident, we closed all the fountains, and so there is that issue at the moment.
Timing.
It's timing, but I think it's heading forwards, definitely.
I think it's good in two ways. It's one, we've got a world-class water facility here producing great water. Let's get people drinking it, reusable bottles. There's a whole sort of flow on effect. So if it was an option to put it into the infrastructure in town, and and it wouldn't be difficult, I don't think, to get businesses on board, even if we did a round of businesses offering sponsored bottles, reusable bottles, and you could actively go around town. I'd be for that. Waste reducing, we've already done a bit of work on this, and I know Rick is heading this up, but I'd be keen to push on. Working with some of the businesses locally, cafes and stuff we've already talked about. I don't know if you want to. That's all I've got really.
Thank you, Delly.
Totally agree with you, and I think Veolia is probably the right people to do that. So there is that confidence around the fact that it's potable water, because a lot of people from out of town don't know what the quality of the water is. So if you've got something that's endorsed by a company, produced by the company, and they're saying this is safe to drink, I think it gives it a bit more weight. I attended a waste workshop. It's called Waste Free with Kate. Kate Meads is someone, I went down to Waihi Beach. It was partially funded and supported by Western Bay and Plenty Council. Thank you very much, Western Bay and Plenty, for subsidising me. Fantastic presentation, and I think it fits incredibly well with the conversations we're having around our new facilities that we're going to build, providing something that the public could attend at a nominal price. I think there's a wider discussion, maybe a paper or something, or a report I can bring to a meeting, post-COVID restrictions to have them come and do their travelling roadshow here in the town hall. Happy to furnish more information around that and also quotes what it might cost for us to subsidise it. Western Bay of Plenty got the price down to $15 per head, which was really, really reasonable. All the attendees, or each household of attendees, so if there was like a hubby and wife, or hubby and hubby, or wife and wife, they got a, all-inclusive. They got a kit to take home to the value of $60, which included things like food container, things like soups that was dishwasher safe, lots of cool stuff, metal straw with a brush and things, just a kind of a kit to get people started. It wasn't preachy, it wasn't throw out all of your plastic today, but when something wears out, replace it with one of these other options. A lot around personal hygiene, menstrual products, nappies for kids, and all sorts of stuff that cause some fairly graphic imagery around our wastewater treatment as well, which was quite entertaining, being given who I'm married to, and fatbergs and all sorts of stuff like that. So it did get a bit graphic, but it was very, very educational and incredibly well presented. I can highly recommend that. I've had conversations with some parties in the community around Roundup again, and I would very much like, if not a formal report, some information on the costs and constraints around going through alternative methods of weed control. Even initially, if it was around things like where food preparation is with barbecues, children's playgrounds and things like that. And I understand Roundup is cheap and effective. Personally, I don't like it and don't even want it used on my own property. But is there some way I could find out perhaps some more information around that in terms of council-owned property? Rika, I think there was something about another workshop or something happening in Coromandel, and I'd like to put myself forward for that.
So I've let them know. Did I not come back and let you know?
I don't think so, no. I've looked.
Well, they're expecting you.
Oh, they're expecting me. Oh, very good. BA5 was fantastic, and I think Milan is doing a really good job, and without being controversial, I think he's getting a bit of pressure, if not actually bullying, from a couple of parties in the community, and whatever support we can offer Milan would be absolutely brilliant.
Agreed.
I'm going to finish on a bum note. I was really disappointed with what happened at our last meeting when Heather wanted to start the meeting with a karakia. I've been working with all sorts of organisations for 30 plus years, including UNESCO and educational organisations. And for over 30 years, every symposium, every meeting I've ever attended in those forums started with a karakia and ended with a pora ake. And that pora ake is actually really, really important because it acknowledges the good work that's happened, and it also asks everyone to leave in good spirit and to travel well. The other thing that I've always been involved in is a karakia motukai, which was to bless the food as well. And it's kind of a, not really a religious thing, but it is one of the things that's part of our significant culture, or our original significant culture, and it's a language that is actually an official first language. It's not a tokenism, it's not just a second language that we toss in there. So I'd like to acknowledge Heather and Donna's efforts at taking it upon yourselves to learn te reo, and would like to see the karakia come back. End of my report.
Thank you. Okay, so what has happened for me? Skaters on our street furniture. I have had lots of people contact me about this, and I see that it's blown up online as well.
Yep.
And we must be at the point where we're about to announce contracts and things like that. And I would love for our comms, and this can come from me as well, to say these skaters, while we're getting on with this process and we're spending this money and really supporting what you guys are doing, can we please be mindful of our main street, our people? It's just not safe. Now, we've got some signs there which seem to have slipped behind the seats. And Brian was going to look into, I don't know what's happened because they're right behind the seats now. So I will get a hold of Brian and sort of, because we spoke about this last meeting, but that needs to be looked at. And we just need to get our message out to our skaters that we completely support your sport and the community is behind you, but you need to be really, really respectful of people and furniture and things like that as well. So that's
I'll follow up with Brian.
Thank you. That's just one thing that I've had lots of people contact me about. What else? I wanted to follow up with Gary Fitzsimons when he was here, made a really, really good point last public forum about whether we could tap into the pay and display parking meters over at Hotwater Beach. I just want to make sure that that didn't get lost and potentially people can then make a donation. I don't know if the technology is there, whether it supports it, but can we maybe have that on our action schedule that that doesn't get lost? Because I think that was a really good suggestion.
Agreed.
Very good.
Yes, I have been contacted, and I will pick this up with you, Tony, about cows and things crossing our state highway. So I've had a gentleman approach me, and maybe with your NZTA role, we could pick that up. But I think there's there's certainly some concerns about the number of cows and the crossing times across a very, very busy stretch of road. So can we pick that up?
We can, and
It has been picked up
it
before.
has,
I don't know
but
where
again,
it's
there to
ended
be a
up.
strong note in that again, to take the appropriate representation, because it is, I hear about it a lot too.
Yeah.
It's not good enough in this day and
Yeah,
age.
so it was a person that came to speak to me on behalf of the group.
Okay.
And then, yes, our waste minimisation journey that we've been talking about as a board, I just wanted to see if we could capture some more time and talk about our next steps. I have been invited, and it's next weekend, and I couldn't go, but I might be able to go, but maybe we could both go. The Zero Waste Raglan folks are coming up to Coromandel, and so they had invited me over to come and join that workshop that they're having. And that's from Plastic Free Coromandel, but who have now rebranded to Rethink Rubbish Coromandel. But one of us will go, or both of us will go to that workshop. It's next Saturday.
Saturday.
28th, 29th.
9 to 3 or something?
I'll find the email. I thought I'd gone back to you both and said Delhi's going to.
I hadn't seen that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rita.
But it'll be interesting to see, because you've obviously been to this Western Bay of Plenty session and then this session, to see what one might be, if we want to bring someone here, how they both work. But I think that, we need to pick up our conversation again. And for me, I would really like to see, and we talked about this really briefly, single-use coffee cups and things like that come out of our main street, that we bring all the cafes in and say, right, what can we do? We've spoken to the supermarkets, but what can we do next? But I think bigger than that, perhaps as a board, we need to set ourselves some sort of target to reduce waste to landfill or something like that. And maybe there's another conversation that we can have after our workshop that we have next week. If we could all put an hour or so together and then have a conversation then, and maybe even grab Andrew and Bruce, for the work that Andrew's doing on the transfer station. But I think if we came together with some sort of target and some achievable goals and pulled in different parts of industry to say, this is what we want to do, how do you guys want to get on board?
Okay, I've just got one thing to add.
Yes.
I also attended that police meeting in the town hall, and they made comment which may not have filtered through. Just so you know, that Matarangi is now officially part of the community patrol. They've the locals have funded a vehicle where we've started the induction training, and they will be representing the north. We've also been obviously working here and over the south side, and just shows you how strong the will for local people to look after themselves, because the vehicle was paid 100% by donations.
Oh, fantastic.
Wow,
Yeah.
it's cool,
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
very cool.
So that was mentioned in that Rupert mentioned that at the meeting. COVID, of course, has got in the way, so the committee has decided that we will not be patrolling until the Auckland situation is safer. We are mainly elderly drivers and we are protecting them because volunteers are priceless. Let's not run with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One last comment?
Yeah,
Yep.
that was also from that meeting. So there was discussion about CCTV. So you cannot get on or off the peninsula
Yes.
without your number plate being recognised.
Yes, I didn't know that.
Is
And
that true for the northern
on both sides.
going round?
Yeah.
Yes.
both
And you
sides.
can't get on or off
Yeah.
Tyra at Pebby, where there's another one.
Yeah.
So there was also talk about the value of these, particularly if they're monitored. And just thinking about the business association, I also am a supporter of CCTV
Yes.
in our business community. So I don't know what they cost. But of that money that we haven't spent from a business association point of view, I'd rather see that sort of cash go back into that for CCTV and our town security, depending on how that panned out. And the one thing I was remiss about was because you did too, I had 5 phone calls last night about the circus.
Yes.
So again, it's simply our comms don't get to people. Well, no, sorry. Most of the boneheads on social media choose not to read mainstream media probably, and they'd rather live in the world rumour. I don't know if it's too late even to go and pay the radio station $100 to go and say,
Can I just say, because that's my one, I did post, I put it on
good.
the chat last week. I've had them speaking on CFM, I've had them speak
Okay.
on more event.
Done.
We've given out heaps of free tickets, we've met the school, I've done everything I possibly can.
Good.
There are a whole heap of people in this community who are just ignorant.
You've been recording.
no, thanks very much for that. That's,
So what was the nature of your phone call?
did it come down from Auckland
Yes.
and bring a gypsy train
Seriously?
of CCTV? Well, so some of the people there are all over 80, living right opposite the road. My last phone call late at night.
Then just don't go to the circus, for God's sake.
Well, the problem is
They're walking amongst.
if it had come from Auckland, I said it can't get out of the Bombay Hills. You can't bring a circus train without being noticed. But it was just about how many people, where many cars, what about the reserve, what about the wind blowing, there's no animals. What about the wind blowing thing over? I said, don't let that worry you. That is their problem. If all their tent gets blown out to sea, not our problem. So people worry themselves about something that's not even their business. But yeah, thanks, Kirsten, you've answered the question, and
No, I think we finished this.
Good on you, Kirsten.
I'll convey that to the appropriate people this afternoon.
Okay,
That's it.
so that wraps up our members' reports. Can I please have a mover and a seconder for our members' reports?
I'll move it.
Thank you. Seconded by Bill. Wonderful. And that brings our meeting to a close.
Unbelievable.
12:35. There you go. Were we even early? No, 5 minutes late. But wait, there's more.
But wait,
Lunch is
there's
here.
more. Like,
Well, wait, there's more. Lunch
For old
is
Alan.
here.
We
And
should have
then
done
we're
it
going to have
first,
a
mate.
session with Alan on the LTP.
So we need to have a session going through the LTP because it's in the stages where